Hi, everyone. This is Bob.
This is Archie.
It's time for another episode.
Yay.
Today's topic is going to be about transitions and layoffs, and we've been through quite a few of them. Personally, I've been through at least 25 companies, but it's not too unusual for a contractor. I think most people haven't done that.
Right. I mean, my first two jobs were 18 years, two jobs, and then after that, it seemed like I was bouncing around a little bit. 2 years here, 3 years there, but really and truly, I've only really been laid off once. Most of the time, I've been leaving on my own volition or contract ends or that kind of thing. So, and 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 the attitude you take into each of those transitions is very different, as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, as we
And
talk
as
about
far
it.
as getting used to it after a while, you know that the contract's going to end or you might get laid off. You see it coming. But I'm going to tell you a story about the first time I was laid off. And quite frankly, I was scared to death. I was working in Honeywell, and they laid off the entire department. And at this point in time, I had a toddler, and of course, we had benefits, and I was raising my family, and I just bought a house in a year or so before that. It was not a good time for me to be laid off. And when they announced they were going to lay me off, along with a bunch of other people, I was terrified, absolutely terrified. Fortunately for me, I got this strange sense of humor. Now, Animal House was a big movie around that time. Now, I've been working for Honeywell for 7 years, and all I could think of was that line that John Belushi said in Animal House: 7 years of college down the drain. So after they announced the layoff, I'm terrified. I'm thinking, and everyone's like, "Oh, all kind of nervous here." Then I start laughing, and I see the look on everybody's face, like the poor guy's lost it. But um, that's neither here nor there. Let's go on with the story. So there I was laid off, but they decided to hire back some of us as contractors. So I got to do that for a little while. So I ended up making more money because of my layoff benefits. I made so much more money that I bought myself a new pickup truck and I had the bathroom redone. Well, the contract thing and the benefit thing, now back then, benefits were not easily gotten unless you were employed. And so having a family, benefits were incredibly important to me. So I went and found a job, and it paid one third more salary than I was making previously. And what I took away from that was, hey, this layoff thing, if you handle it right, it's not so bad.
When one door closes, another door opens. That's what they always say.
Well, it's also, I found throughout the industry, if you move around a bit, you tend to get a better salary. Raises don't always come very well or very high. And so that first layoff experience set the tone for the rest of my career.
And I'll just back that up because I mean I said the first 18 years are two companies, but every time after that, when I started jumping around, it's like every time I change jobs, I usually try to get a double-digit increase in my salary, and most of the time I could get it. At one point, I realized that I was an outlier. I was making so much money that I was getting hard to get hired because I was making more money than the average person in this
Well,
profession.
that's a nice problem to have.
That's a nice problem to have. The other thing I learned is that when I was out of work, it wasn't necessarily because of a layoff, but I was out of work after I quit one of the jobs. The biggest thing that I learned was that going to work costs a lot of money. So, gas, maintenance on the car, laundry, all that stuff back when
Oh,
you have to go to the office every day.
definitely
When that
cost to
goes
do a
away,
business.
yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't as frightening as I thought it would be because, yeah, my expenses dropped precipitously and so I could get by on a lot less. And that was a key learning for me anyway. It made it not so scary the next time it happened. So,
Yes, I found that I got used to it more and more. Now, in my contract career, I have expected contracts to end, which is normal. So I'm always looking for a job or the next contract ahead of time. There was one time, though, I got a little nervous. And honestly, I'll freely admit that the ending of a contract, the ending of a job, or being laid off still makes me nervous. I was laid off last year from a contract. I was there for quite a while, uh, and they decided to let go of the contractors, without much of it, less than a week's notice.
Yeah, that happens a lot, unfortunately.
So it still makes me nervous to this day, uh, but it's not overwhelming, and I know how to deal with it.
And I have to admit, you can have fun with it. Okay, so one of the things early in my career when I was coming out of college, I guess there were a lot of people who saw me and said, well, you make a good salesman. So it seems like everybody was trying to get me into sales, but I'd heard about sales and I didn't want anything to do with it. But when I was out of work, I decided to take a job as a car salesman, and I had a blast. It was so much fun. Okay, it didn't pay much. I mean, kept the wolf from the door, but it was just a blast working with the public and It turns out I was a very good salesman. So all
Well,
those people were right.
well, let's put that in context. That was when we had the high tech recession.
Yes.
If people remember that, it was in the beginning of the 21st century, and high tech took a hit, and so a lot of people in high tech were laid off, and I managed to survive on part-time contracts, so I got through with it. But I remember you got laid off, and you ended up looking for a new job, and you took this one temporarily.
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of it during my periods of unemployment because I took the car sales job after the startup failed. It wasn't necessarily a layoff. I don't know. I don't consider it a layoff. I mean, because the whole company went away.
Right.
But
A layoff tends to be a personal thing,
yeah,
in a way.
yeah. So this was more like I was experimenting. I mean, at one point, I sold cars. I also was a food demonstrator at what was it? At BJ's. And again, that wasn't so much fun, but at the same time, it was just a lot of times technical writing can be kind of a lonely profession. You kind of, you're sitting your head down doing writing. And so for me, it was kind of nice to be interacting with the public and doing. So for me, that was kind of fun. I did enjoy it. It's just better than sitting at home. You know what I mean? So that's all it was. So, and so, if you have the right attitude, it can be less frightening, a couple bucks here, a couple of bucks there, job there, job there. You meet other people, blah. And it seemed like historically, if I took a job and I liked it within a month, because even with the car sales, I took that job. I was setting records in terms of sales, and after 6 weeks, I got a tech writing job, and it's gone. And I get the feeling that I probably wouldn't have gotten that job had I not taken the sales job. So there you go.
Yes, one of the
Yeah.
things that I think is a true statement is that you're in a better position looking for a job when you have a job. You have the confidence. You don't feel so desperate. You don't have that nervousness. So there's always that. And I've taken that as a freelancer. I always look for the next contract ahead of time. In fact, okay, this is much later in my career now. I don't look for contracts anymore. They look for me. I'm in a very special position here to do that, and consider myself very fortunate that I've made a lot of great contacts. So I just so I don't worry about that anymore. To be honest with you, I got laid off last in August, and I'd already started working with a company before I was gone. I mean, within the week, somebody was already recruiting me for their startup company.
Yeah, it's really funny because I'm still, as you're talking, I'm thinking about timelines, and I'm confused. But anyway, because I'm not sure when I took that car salesman's job. I don't know what the circumstances were because I remember
It was early 2000s because that's when the high tech recession hit.
okay because I know it was after I quit that job that I mentioned before because and it was interesting because I had this unrealistic expectation because when the startup failed, I had another job. I had another offer on the table within a week of that happening.
Yeah.
So when I left the other job, part of the reason I felt confident quitting that other job is like, I get another job in a week. It didn't work out that way.
No, I tended to look for a job before my contract ends
Yeah.
or before I decide I want to move on.
Well, I mean, it's kind of yeah. I mean, it is. I remember even when I was selling cars, it's like, and I was being successful, and some of the other salesmen that were there, I'm telling them, yeah, I got an offer from this company. I said, but you got a job. I said, I'm always looking. I mean, always looking. So I don't care. I don't care how good a job I'm in. I'm always looking. I'm always updating my resume. I'm always applying for jobs if it looks interesting. You never know, right?
Well, one of the
So-
basic characteristics, really for both of us, is that we're curious. We get easily bored doing the same thing over and over again. And so transitions to us is never a liability. It's an opportunity.
Right, right. I consider myself a change agent. That doesn't go over that well these days when I interview. I don't think they want that anymore. They want somebody who's not going to do that. But I consider myself a change agent. I like change. I'm the guy who initiates change most of the time. So
Well, one of the things I like to say about that is that being a change agent myself, uh, it's always a thoughtful change. I never just change things to change things.
yeah,
It's got to be. It's got to be for the better.
okay. So one of the last company I worked for, they had a personality test as part of the interview process, right?
Oh, I hate those.
I actually I found it fascinating because they always promise, oh, we're not going to use this for whatever, it's not going to affect our decision, blah blah blah. But what came out as my number one thing is what do you call it, maximizer, and that's another word for change agent. Okay, so when I saw that, I said, okay, so this must be pretty good because this is what I think about myself. And all a maximizer is you walk into any situation and you look for ways to make it better, make it more efficient, make it, whatever. You find ways to make it better. And if you're in a management position, you find ways to make people better. You might find ways to make the team work better together. And again, that's the way I approach management. So it was right on. So I now internalize that and say, okay, yes, I am. It's not just my imagination. I am a change agent.
I could tell you look at it from a management point of view. I do the same thing from an individual contributor, the worker bee point of view.
Yep.
It's just I go
Yep.
in and I say, wow, what's all this information we're documenting? It's pretty redundant. And I look for ways to make that efficient, to make the customer come up faster, knowledgeable on our product, to make life easier for them and to make life easier for me too, because why should I throw out tons of documentation when I only need, half of that?
So yeah, back to transitions.
Back to transitions. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. One of the things that I do is I try to look for a job, my next transition, either within a corporation, if I'm in a corporation, or with the next startup that does something not quite the same that I'm doing. And so those types of transitions are very interesting for me.
And I will say, and I mentioned this to you earlier, that although my first 18 years of my career, I only worked for 2 companies, I had at least 8 different positions in those across those 2 companies. So even when I'm in one place for a while, I don't do the same job for the whole time I'm there. I usually look for other opportunities to do different things to expand my knowledge, and just like you said, I get bored doing the same thing. So I'm always looking to, because I'm thinking, okay, so I work for AT&T. I came in as a technical writer. I became actually what do they call it? Mechanical engineering technician, support technician, and then I went into technical support, and there was one other thing in there somewhere. But the thing is, I didn't stay stagnant. I wanted to do different things, and then after the AT&T back in the old days was very provincial in that I didn't have a degree in mechanical engineering, so how could I couldn't really move up as a mechanical engineering assistant.
Right.
Right.
Degrees are very important back
Right.
then.
And then
But
when I
that's
went
another episode.
to yeah, exactly. And when I went into support, I had no background in that. I was good at it. That's how I met my ex-wife. It's kind of a funny story. Every time I'd leave my office, when I came back, she was in my office standing over my desk, and I'm like, so I thought she was into me, right? But it turns out what it was is that I had a reputation as somebody who got things done. So she was like a manager in technical support, actually. So when she needed something done, she'd always come to me, right? So anyway, the rest is history.
Sounds like a little bit of ego there, but that's okay. We won't worry about that
Hey,
a little
she
bit.
married me. She married me.
Oh, you did.
She
Yeah.
did marry me. So there you go.
Back to transitions.
That's it.
Oh, this wine is good. Okay. So, the point that you make is that you can further your career, and you don't need to switch companies. I mean, if the company's got different areas, to avail yourself of those opportunities. Go in, take a look, do something different. Some people, and I think we need these people too, is just that they do one thing, they do it very well, and that's all they want to do.
Right.
It's hard for us to think about because we're the exact opposite.
Yeah. I mean, my sister worked for New York State for over 30 years. I don't know how she did it. I couldn't imagine doing the same thing for that long.
If I'm to be brutally honest about myself, I know that I like doing new things. I'm doing videos for a company right now, reworking a whole new doc set for another company, and these things are fine. But when I was with a corporation, I find that once I do this new thing, get this doc set out and get everything all done, then it's updating. Oh, we got a new feature, it changes things, and we update the same manuals over and over again till I'm bored to tears.
Right.
And I am not very efficient when I'm bored.
No, I mean, they say that people do their best work when they're having fun, and that's why when we were talking about management at one of the other episodes, I was having a blast. So that's why I was doing so well, because it was fun for me. And so some of the contracts I've had over the last few years were not fun because they were not. It's something I did 20 years ago. I could do this in my sleep. So I actually I remember one contract that my manager kept looking over me if we were in a meeting or something. She goes, "Are you okay?" Because I was falling asleep. Yeah, it's like I don't. I've done. Been there, done that. Don't need to listen to this anymore.
So transitions are a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotta keep us interested. But back to layoffs a little bit. I think I said earlier that I've worked for at least 25 companies, mostly startups, for some corporations. It's usually the corporations I get laid off. Corporations have this thing about, well, time to get rid of some people. Contractors go first. We're the first ballast to be thrown overboard.
Right.
Keep the ship afloat. And that's fine. I've learned to deal with that. But like I said, it is a little scary. But you don't need to, for transitions, you don't need to leave your company if your company's got different opportunities.
Right.
For me, I needed to go through, to manage my career, I was working for Honeywell doing computer systems. My next job, when I got laid off, I went to a telephony system. I wanted to learn something different. And then I went to digital because they were doing networking, which is something different. Later on, I went to a medical company, and I really, really pushed myself to learn all these different types of technologies, which I think has broadened my experience, and I have a better view of things. I can bring those experiences from different technologies into whatever job I'm working with now. And so those transitions have really helped me in my career to the point where, like I said, people seek me out.
And I have to admit, I can't say I've been deliberate in terms of getting into all these different things. It's usually just I just fall into them. Just like some opportunity comes by, and I say, "Yeah, I can do that," and jump into it.
No, you're an opportunist.
I am, and actually, yeah,
no bones about it.
Yeah, I've been called that. So yeah, but as a result, though, I mean, for example, I remember when I was at AT&T, they had this educational requirement, right, where you had to do 20 hours of education, to keep your job, let's say. And so, I came in as a tech writer, so 20 hours. First couple of years, I was done with the technical writing courses. Okay. So I took C programming, I took some other stuff. And as you were aware, at one point when we were at Digital, we were trying to do a transition. We were trying to convert some documentation from one format to another. And the first group that did it, it took them, I think, 6 weeks, or was it? Yeah, no, it was 3 months. It took them 3 months to convert these documents to doing it manually. And the person who, to their credit, the manager whose team did that, he presented what they did. And I'm looking at it, I said, I could write a program to do that. So I went back to my office, used my C programming knowledge and wrote a program so that when we did it, 3 weeks. And I actually won $2,500. I got a $2,500 bonus for doing that.
Yeah.
And that was back when they didn't give bonuses that big. So,
in this slightly off topic, the problem with that was that that group they were all technical writers. They didn't have a different perspective. And you had that experience. You had that different perspective, and you saw a different solution, which was much better, more efficient.
And again, it fits back into my whole maximizer thing. In other words, that's my first thought. I mean, I can do that. I can do that faster. So, yeah.
Yeah, so back to transitions.
Back to transition. Well, this is all part of it.
It is all
It is part of it because
it.
it's in other words, you walk out of one thing and you've got all these skills, and you're qualified to do a lot of different things. It really helps to have that kind of broad perspective when you go out into the job market.
Oh, absolutely. I've made a career out of that.
As have I.
Yeah, so transitions are actually very, very helpful. But they are scary. I mean, even when I purposely went to another technology, just if somebody out there is doing that too, if you've got that, little bit of fear or, trepidation, nervousness, these are all normal things. As many times as I've done it, I still have that little bit of feeling. Obviously, it's not as bad as the very first time when I got laid
Right.
off and I was terrified.
Right.
You get used to it. But having a paycheck coming in every week or every other week, whatever it is, it's and then all of a sudden to temporarily lose that
Right.
is frightening.
Right. I mean, if you look, you look at Facebook these days, it seems like most of the focus is on multiple streams of income because it's becoming clear to people that you can't depend on a job. It's like in the old days that was the goal, is to stay at one company for your whole life and get a pension and retire, blah blah blah. You can't really do that anymore. Companies will throw you away like old trash. So you gotta take care of yourself, and you gotta find ways of making sure that you have an alternate stream of income. If your job goes away for whatever reason.
Sounds like managing your career, which is not depending on any one company.
Right.
Sounds like we need to do an episode on that. But
Well, I mean, I know you as a contractor, you at several periods in your career have worked for multiple companies and contract, and that's really a good idea. I mean, ultimately you want to get passive income, but when you need money, you can always just pick up another contract. And once you get to a certain experience level, it's very hard to find a job that's actually going to keep you busy 40 hours a week. As we were driving here, I was talking about that whole idea is that you're negotiating a contract or whatever, and they're telling you what they need done, and it's like, you really need a full-time person for that? And most of the time they don't, but they don't know that.
well,
Yeah.
we're at a point in our career where we have lots and lots of experience, and so most people, when they interview people, they don't expect that type of experience.
I agree with you to some extent. Because I've only been able to convince one company to go off of the hourly thing. You say, okay, it's very clear what you need. You have a very clearly defined deliverable. So why don't you just let me look at this, and I'll give you a fixed price estimate on how much it'll cost me to do that, how much it'll cost you for me to do that for you, and so they let me do that, and they saved a lot of money. I just wish more companies would do it. I mean, I think I charged them like $35,000 to do the whole thing, and their project took almost a year and a half. But my work only took, like a month or so, right?
That's how much time you put in.
Yeah, but if they paid me by the hour, they would have had to pay me for a whole year, and that's a waste of money. And I wouldn't be doing anything. I would just be stretching a job that I really only needed a month or so of time. So
Some of us do that.
yeah, I know.
Just teasing now. But one of the good things about transitions is that going into different places, even within the same company, you get to work with different groups of people. Now, after many years of being a writer and working with very different groups of people, one of the things I've been fortunate is running into the same people again and again, and we find people that are easy to work with. I work with some incredibly intelligent, innovative people, and I'm very pleased to say that, and the fact that they appreciate what I bring to the table. Now they know what I can do, and to go back to your point, they don't hire me for full time. I mean, one time I was asked to work 20 hours a month, just to get them going
Mm-hmm.
while they were still a small startup. Eventually, that turned into a part-time job, and then they got bought out by a big corporation, and it turned into a full-time contract over time. And I've been working with the same group of people, I think 3 or 4 companies now.
That's nice.
It is.
Yeah.
But because I'm willing to take those changes, those transitions, you get to meet the people, you get to form those connections, and then you manage your career. You go through some tough times, but you manage your transitions, you manage your career, you keep your contacts, and tell you it works out.
this
I think
I'll,
that's the big point to make.
and I'll just point out that this okay. So Bob and I have very different personalities. So Bob,
Yes, we do.
yeah, Bob is very good at the whole networking, maintaining contacts. You know, you've got people all over the world that you call friends that, you know, you can go and talk to. I'm an introvert. I'm not like that. I really don't do that very well. And I know that it makes it a little bit harder for me to do what you're doing. So I just, I'm giving that other point of view because I know there are other people out there that are like me. And it is a little bit more difficult, but you can still navigate. You can still, you have to play up more of you have to be very, very good at telling your story in terms of what you bring to the table because you're always having to prove yourself to new people as opposed to um, falling back on people who know you, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah,
I've had to do that several
yeah.
times.
So it is a little bit different. So you're now in a position because of all the people that you stayed in contact with that you don't have to chase jobs. I don't have that. So
It is true. And there's a couple of times I think I hired you.
yeah, well, like I said, I mean, okay. So the difference between introverted people and extroverted people is like typically an introvert would have one or two really good friends, and everybody else is kind of an acquaintance. You're my very good friend, which is why you hired me because you know you're doing what those other people that you have are doing for you, right?
Exactly.
Right.
I want somebody who can do the job, and I
Right.
know you can do the job.
Right. So
But I think we went into that in another thing. I brought you in so I wouldn't have to take a management job.
and that was fine. I mean, it looks good on the resume to come in as a writer and then end up being the pub's manager. So yeah, I mean that looks
That
good.
worked out for you.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
It did, and I had fun doing that because it was the first time I'd ever gotten a chance to actually build a group from scratch, and recommend tools and do the whole thing from soup to nuts. So that was kind of fun for me.
Yeah, and just a little background here. Archie is the one that wants to do the management thing, build the groups and stuff like that. I wanted to do the user interface and usability, which we've talked about before. And I wanted to focus on that. And management and this design work, kind of tough to do together. One has to take precedence. And so I hired Archie to come in and take the role that the company wanted me to take. So I could focus on the other piece, which is a lot more interesting to me. And that worked out very well.
Yeah.
You built the group. I helped with the user interface, and the company failed, but it wasn't because of what we did. I mean, we actually got extra funding because of what we did, and the company survived a little bit longer.
And that's why, and because of the fact that I built that group as a manager, when I went to get my next position when that company failed, yeah, I could say, yeah, I built a group from scratch, you know, so I could justify the salary I was asking for, which was busting their budget, but they paid me anyway, you know, that kind of thing. And that was that company that I went to. That I think I told the story where at some point it became clear to me that I was making more than their engineering managers. So, but I was worth it anyway.
Well, that brings me off to another layoff that I had. I guess I can mention EMC. I was working as a contractor for EMC. We had a small startup that was bought up by EMC, and I was doing this networking work. And it was interesting because it had to do with encryption and, you know, keeping everything. It was an information rights management type of thing, which was big at one point in time.
Yep.
And so it was pretty cool working on that. But EMC, of course, like all corporations, go through their thing. And I got laid off. Because of the work I had done previously at that company we were at, I was able to get a job quickly redesigning a user interface. No writing at all. I had that background. I had that thing. I was able to take the contract. Well, the startup, that's when I think the recession hit. And that startup started going downhill. So they had to let me go. And in a strange story, which fits transitions, is that you're gonna love this one. Okay, so I'm at EMC. I'm doing this work, and I'm really into, you know, for folks who knows what an API is, it's programming language. And I was actually working with that. I was working with some very innovative tools, and we were doing some interesting things that most writers don't do. And I was working very closely with management and the lead engineers. Well, the layoff came. Everybody was sorry. They were more upset than I was.
Sure.
I did this user interface thing, and I'd gotten to the point where we had a design down, and it was ready to go. Then they got hit with less funding. So off I went. And so there was actually a time when I was unemployed for a little bit. EMC called me back up. The guy that they had, the employee that had replaced me, failed miserably, took a medical leave of absence right before the product was supposed to go out. There was nobody that understood the product. So they brought me in temporarily to fill in, get the product out, get the release out, because I already knew what they were doing.
Right.
So I came in, did the work real fast. Well, at the end of that, I figured I'd be off again. To my surprise, they laid off the employee and kept my contract. One of the rare, I think that's the only time that's ever happened to
They
me.
usually don't do that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
they usually don't
Yeah.
do that.
But he went out on disability. He went out on short-term disability, right? Is that what
Well,
he did?
only because he wasn't doing the work.
Oh yeah, no, I think I told the story in one of the other episodes where that's a standard strategy for people who are incompetent. As soon as they get found out, they go out on short-term disability.
I didn't say he was
So-
incompetent.
I did.
I may have inferred it, but I did not say, and I'm not even sure I should have used the gender. They, I may not have, they could have been incompetent. I just know that when I was explaining to the writer what I did as a transition before I left, his eyes glazed over.
Yeah. So I mean, okay. So another transition. When I was going, okay. So I'll just wrap this up. It's having a broad range of experience, both as an individual contributor and a manager. I went into this company. It was a Federal Reserve, and they needed somebody to do information architecture, and I'd never done information architecture before. But their problem really was that they had an engineer who was a very bright guy, but he was trying to solve a problem, and all he was doing was writing programs and throwing them over the wall, and then nobody would use what he delivered. So they needed somebody to come in and take charge of that. And so I wasn't a manager, but I had to manage this guy. And the reason they hired me is because they could tell I could manage this guy. And the funny story is during the interview, it was one of these group interviews, and all the managers are asking me questions, blah, blah, blah. And finally, this engineer who was also in the room, he goes, well, I have really strong ideas as to how this should be done. And I just shrugged my shoulders. That's what I did. And the managers who were in the room started giggling because, I wasn't intimidated by that. It's like, no big deal. I can deal with you. And I got him under control. We worked very well together, and we did some good stuff. So anyway, I just think just the whole idea of, don't limit yourself when you're looking for a job. Don't limit yourself to what you've done before. Hopefully you've gathered a whole bunch of skills and things over your career, and you can bring them all to bear in whatever.
And to go back to the layoffs, don't think that a layoff is an ending. Right. It's usually, that piece is ending, but maybe something bigger is coming. And for me, that's happened almost every single time. Sometimes I've had to be employed a little bit, but that's okay. I can't complain about the position I'm in. Okay. Well, I see that wine bottle is just about empty, so I think it's time to wrap up this episode. This is Bob.
And this is Archie.
And we want to thank Sterling-Lancaster Community TV for recording us. Thank you, Matt. We definitely appreciate this. It's been a great time. We'll talk to you again. Bye.